I never thought I'd end up sleeping in the room where we used to store Christmas decorations. It's funny how life humbles you. One day you're signing the deed to your dream house, planting roses by the mailbox, watching your children grow up in rooms filled with laughter. The next, you're 73 years old, folding your life into a converted storage space that still smells faintly of mothballs and artificial pine. But that's what happens when you trust the wrong people, even when those people are your own blood. My name is Dorothy Castellano, though most people just call me Dot. I raised 3 children in a small town outside of Pittsburgh, 2 boys and a girl. My husband Frank died 11 years ago, massive heart attack while watching the Steelers game. One minute he was yelling at the television, the next he was gone. The doctor said he probably didn't feel a thing. I've spent every day since wondering if that's true or just something they tell widows to help them sleep. After Frank passed, I did what I thought I was supposed to do. I kept the house clean. I volunteered at the church. I made sure to call each of my kids every Sunday evening, even when they were too busy to talk for more than 5 minutes. I told myself I was fine. That grief was just something you carried quietly, like an old coat that didn't quite fit anymore, but you wore anyway because it had been Frank's favorite. The house became too much after a while. Not the memories I wanted those, but the stairs hurt my knees. The furnace made sounds like a dying animal. The property taxes kept climbing, and my pension from 40 years of teaching elementary school only stretched so far. When the roof started leaking during a spring storm, I knew I couldn't keep pretending I could manage on my own. That's when my son Richard called with what he presented as the perfect solution. "Mom, Sandra and I have been talking," he said, his voice carrying that careful tone people use when they've already made up their mind but want you to think you have a choice. "You should move in with us. We've got plenty of space. And honestly, we could use the help with the kids." Richard was my oldest. He'd done well for himself, corporate lawyer, big house in the suburbs, married to Sandra, a woman who smiled with her mouth but never her eyes. They had 3 children, Madison, who was 15, Tyler, who was 12, and little Emma, who was 8. I should have seen it coming. I really should have. But when you're lonely and your knees ache and you're tired of eating dinner by yourself while Jeopardy plays in the background, you don't ask the right questions. You just feel grateful that someone wants you around. "That sounds wonderful, honey," I told him. "But I couldn't possibly be a burden. I can pay rent. Help with groceries, Mom." "Don't be ridiculous. Your family." Those 3 words. Your family. I held onto them like a lifeline. The move happened quickly. Too quickly. Looking back, Richard hired movers who packed up my entire life in less than 6 hours. Most of my furniture went into storage. Their house was already fully furnished, Sandra explained, and there simply wasn't room for my things. I was allowed to bring clothes, photos, and a few personal items, just temporarily, Richard assured me when I hesitated over boxing up Frank's reading chair. "Until we figure out what you really need." I signed papers that day. A lot of papers. Richard spread them across my kitchen table, his expensive pen clicking impatiently as he pointed to signature lines. "This one transfers the house deed to me just to make the sale easier. Mom, this one sets up your pension to deposit directly into our joint account so we can handle all your expenses. This one establishes a trust for your savings, all perfectly legal, I promise. It'll protect your assets. Shouldn't I have a lawyer look at these?" I asked. Richard's smile tightened just slightly. "Mom, I am a lawyer. And I'm your son. Do you really think I'd do anything to hurt you?" I signed. God help me. I signed everything. The room they gave me had been their storage space, tucked at the end of a hallway on the 2nd floor. It was small, barely big enough for a twin bed, a narrow dresser, and a chair. The single window looked out over their backyard, where elaborate playset sat unused, slowly being reclaimed by weeds. "We'll decorate it however you want," Sandra said, though she was already backing out of the doorway. "Make it feel like home." But it never did. The first few weeks weren't terrible. I made breakfast for the kids before school. I did laundry. I cleaned bathrooms and vacuumed and learned where Sandra kept her special organic cleaning products that cost more than my monthly grocery budget used to. I told myself I was contributing, earning my keep, being useful. Then the requests started. "Mom, Could you pick up my dry cleaning? You're not doing anything today anyway. Dorothy, the kids need to be at soccer practice by 4. You'll handle that, right? I'm having my book club over Friday. The house needs to be spotless. And could you make those little tea sandwiches? The ones with the crusts cut off? My pension checks, all $1,847 of them, deposited monthly, vanished into their account. When I asked Richard about accessing some of my own money, he looked at me with something like pity. Mom, it's all going toward your expenses. Room and board, your share of utilities, groceries. It actually costs us more than your pension covers. But we're family. We don't keep a running tab. I wanted to argue. I wanted to point out that I wasn't eating expensive organic groceries or running up utility bills in my tiny room where I kept the heat turned down to avoid being wasteful. I wanted to ask why I needed permission to access my own Social Security and pension money, but I didn't, because I was 73 and alone and terrified that if I made waves, I'd end up with nowhere to go. So I became what they needed me to be: a servant, an unpaid nanny, a housekeeper who worked for room and board in a space that still smelled like storage. The grandchildren barely spoke to me. Madison spent all her time on her phone, rolling her eyes whenever I tried to start a conversation. Tyler tolerated my presence only when I was driving him somewhere or making him snacks. Only Emma showed me any real affection, crawling into my lap sometimes while I watched TV in the family room until Sandra started redirecting her away. Emma, sweetie, Grandma's tired. Why don't you play in your room? I wasn't tired. I was desperately lonely. My other children visited rarely. Michael, my middle child, lived in Seattle and called on holidays, his voice always distracted, always cutting the conversation short. My daughter Lisa came by for Sunday dinner twice a month, but she and Sandra barely concealed their mutual dislike. And the meals were tense affairs where I served food I'd cooked and cleaned up afterward while they all retired to the living room. You doing okay, Mom? Lisa asked me once, cornering me by the sink. Of course, I lied. Richard and Sandra are so generous, letting me stay here. Lisa's eyes narrowed. She'd always been the perceptive one. You know you could. I'm fine, I said firmly, because I couldn't bear to see the pity in her face or admit that I'd made a terrible mistake. The months blurred together. Fall became winter, became spring. I stopped recognizing myself in the mirror. The woman staring back looked older than 73, more tired, more defeated. I'd always prided myself on standing tall, on maintaining dignity. Frank used to say I could walk into any room and own it. Now I shuffled. I apologized for existing. I made myself small. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in late April. I'd spend the morning scrubbing baseboards. Sandra had mentioned they looked dusty, which I'd learned was code for clean them immediately. My niece screamed in protest, but I kept going because I'd also learned that Sandra's observations about the house's cleanliness were really observations about my usefulness. Around noon, I decided to make myself lunch. Just a sandwich. I opened the refrigerator and reached for the deli turkey. That's the expensive organic turkey, Sandra said from behind me, making me jump. For the kids' lunches, I turned slowly. I just wanted there's peanut butter in the pantry. That's fine for you. Something in her tone, dismissive, cold, speaking to me like I was a child or a burden, made my throat tight. I nodded and closed the refrigerator, my hand trembling slightly. I made a peanut butter sandwich. I ate it in my room, sitting on the edge of my narrow bed, staring at the one photo I'd been allowed to frame Frank and me on our wedding day. Both of us so young and hopeful, completely unaware of how the story would end. That's when I started crying. Really crying. For the first time since Frank died. Great. Heaving sobs that I muffled with my pillow so no one would hear and think I was being dramatic. I'd given them everything. My house, my savings, my pension, my freedom. I'd worked myself to exhaustion keeping their home perfect and their children fed and their lives running smoothly, and I couldn't even eat the good turkey. That night, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went for a walk. I waited until after dinner. After the dishes were done, after Sandra had retired to her home office and Richard to his den. I put on my coat, my old wool coat from the house, one of the few things that still felt like mine, and slipped out the front door. The neighborhood was quiet. Expensive houses set back from the street, perfect lawns, BMWs and Teslas in driveways. The kind of place where everyone had made it, where success was measured in square footage and property values. I walked without direction, just needing to move, to breathe air that didn't feel heavy with obligation and resentment. I ended up at a small park a few blocks away, sitting on a bench under a street light, watching a young family pack up their picnic dinner. The mother was laughing at something the father said. Their two kids were chasing each other around the swings. I remembered being that young mother. I remembered Frank pushing Richard on a swing while Michael demanded his turn and Lisa collected flowers she insisted were for me. I remembered being tired but happy, broke but rich in all the ways that mattered. When had I lost that? When had I become so small? You look like you could use a friend. I looked up to find an elderly man standing a respectful distance away, his hands in the pockets of a cardigan that had seen better days. He had kind eyes, the sort of weathered face that suggested he'd lived a full life and had stories to tell. "I'm fine," I said automatically. He smiled. "That's what I always say too, especially when it's not true. Mind if I sit?" I gestured to the bench. He settled down with a soft groan, stretching out his legs. "Beautiful evening," he said. "Yes." We sat in silence for a while. It should have been awkward, but somehow it wasn't. "I'm Walter," he said eventually. "I live over on Maple Street. Lost my wife 3 years ago, so I take a walk every evening. Helps with the quiet, Dorothy," I replied. "I'm staying with my son. For now." "For now," Walter repeated, and something in his tone suggested he understood exactly what those 2 words meant. "You know what I've learned in my 78 years, Dorothy? People will take as much as you let them take. Family especially. They think love means you'll accept anything, forgive anything, tolerate anything." I felt tears prickling my eyes again. "I'm lucky they took me in, are you?" Walter asked gently. "Or are they lucky to have free labor and access to your income?" I opened my mouth to defend Richard and Sandra, but nothing came out. Because Walter had articulated exactly what I'd been feeling but couldn't name. "I should get back," I whispered. Walter pulled a small card from his wallet and pressed it into my hand. "That's the senior center downtown. They have lunch programs, social groups, legal aid clinics every Thursday, just in case you ever need it." I clutched a card like a secret as I walked back to Richard's house. That card sat in my dresser drawer for 3 weeks before I found the courage to use it. It was a Thursday. Sandra had left me a note. She communicated primarily through notes now, as if speaking directly to me was too much effort, listing everything that needed to be done. Deep clean the kitchen, organize the garage, hem a dress for Madison, pick up Richard's prescription. I did none of it. Instead, I took the bus downtown. The senior center was nothing fancy, a squat brick building that had probably been something else decades ago, retrofitted with ramps and automatic doors. Inside, it smelled like coffee and old books and something baking. A bulletin board by the entrance advertised bingo nights, art classes, a quilting circle. "Can I help you?" A woman about my age sat at a reception desk, her smile genuine and warm. "There's supposed to be legal aid? 3rd floor, conference room B. Should be wrapping up in about 20 minutes. But Diane always stays late if someone needs help." I took the elevator up, my heart pounding like I was doing something wrong, something dangerous. The conference room held 6 people and a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an even sharper suit. This must be Diane. She was going over some paperwork with an elderly man whose hands shook as he signed documents. I waited in the hallway, suddenly feeling foolish. What was I doing here? Richard was a lawyer. If I needed legal help, I should ask my own son, except I couldn't, because my son was the problem. "You can come in," Diane called, noticing me hovering. "I'm just finishing up with Mr. Patterson." I entered hesitantly and took a seat in the back row. Diane concluded her meeting, walked Mr. Patterson to the door with reassuring words about restraining orders and protective services, then turned her attention to me. "I'm Diane Friedman. I volunteer here every Thursday, help seniors with legal issues. What can I do for you?" I don't know what made me tell her everything. Maybe it was the fact that she was a stranger. Maybe it was because I was so desperately tired of pretending everything was fine. Maybe I just needed someone to tell me I wasn't crazy. I told her about Frank dying, about the house and the pension and signing all those papers, about the storage room and the expensive turkey and being treated like help in my own son's home. Diane listened without interrupting, her expression growing increasingly troubled. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Dorothy, do you have copies of any of the documents you signed?" "No, Richard said he'd keep everything safe. Do you know where your house proceeds went? How much you received from the sale?" "Richard handled it. He said after the mortgage and closing costs and real estate fees, there wasn't much left. Maybe 20,000. It's in the trust he set up." Diane's jaw tightened. "And you have access to this trust?" "Well, no. But Richard manages it for me." "Dorothy, I need to ask you something, and I want you to really think about your answer. Did you understand what you were signing? Did Richard explain it in detail, give you time to review everything, suggest you get independent legal counsel?" I thought back to that day in my kitchen. Richard's impatient pen clicking, the way he'd flip through pages, pointing at signature lines, his explanations brief and technical and making me feel stupid for not understanding. "No," I whispered. Diane closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them, I saw anger there. "Not at me for me, Dorothy. I can't know for certain without seeing the documents, but based on what you're telling me, I believe your son may have committed elder financial abuse. The house transfer, the pension redirect, the trust he manages, these are all red flags. And the fact that you're essentially working as unpaid labor in exchange for inadequate living conditions. That's exploitation." The word hit me like a slap. "Exploitation, but he's my son," I said, as if that explained everything, as if that made it impossible. "I know," Diane said gently. "That's what makes these cases so hard. But Dorothy, blood doesn't give someone the right to steal from you. And make no mistake, if what I suspect is true, that's what's happened. Your son has stolen your money, your home, and your dignity." I started crying again. Diane pushed a box of tissues across the table. "What can I do?" I asked. "I have nothing. No money, nowhere to go." "That's not quite true. You still have legal rights. We can file a complaint with Adult Protective Services. We can petition the court to review the trust and property transfer. If there was undue influence or if you weren't mentally competent when you signed, I was competent," I said quickly. "Being confused or trusting your son doesn't make you incompetent," Diane said. "But we need to prove you didn't understand what you were signing and that Richard took advantage of that. It won't be easy. He's a lawyer. He'll have protected himself, so there's no point." "I didn't say that. I said it won't be easy. But Dorothy, you can't keep living like this. It's not right. And deep down, you know that." I did know that. I'd known it for months. "What's the first step?" I asked. Diane smiled. "Getting copies of those documents. Can you access them?" I thought about Richard's home office, the locked filing cabinet where he kept all his important papers. "Maybe," I said. That night, I lay awake in my narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, planning something I never thought I'd do. I was going to spy on my own son. The opportunity came 3 days later. Richard and Sandra were taking the kids to Madison's soccer tournament, an all-day event 2 hours away. They'd be gone from early morning until late evening. "You'll be all right here by yourself?" Sandra asked, though she didn't sound particularly concerned. "There's leftover chicken in the fridge for your lunch. I'll be fine," I said. I watched from the window as they loaded into their Escalade and pulled away. Then I stood there for another 10 minutes, making absolutely sure they weren't coming back because someone forgot something. The house felt different, empty, bigger, echoing with absence. I walked to Richard's office. The door was locked, but I knew where he kept the key, in a decorative bowl on the high shelf in the hallway closet. I'd watched him retrieve it once when he'd locked himself out. My hands shook as I unlocked the door. The office was everything Richard was: expensive, organized, coldly professional. Dark wood desk, leather chair, diplomas on the wall. The filing cabinet sat in the corner, also locked. I spent 20 minutes searching for that key, growing increasingly panicked. Finally, I found it taped to the underside of his desk drawer, such an obvious place that I'd overlooked it. The filing cabinet held exactly what Diane suspected I'd find. There was a folder with my name on it. Inside were copies of everything I'd signed. I started reading. The house sale hadn't netted $20,000. It had sold for $340,000, and after the mortgage and fees, there'd been $287,000 remaining. 28700. I read the number 3 times. Certain I was misunderstanding. The trust document was worse. It gave Richard complete control over my assets with no oversight, no requirement to provide accounting, no obligation to use the money for my benefit. It was essentially a legal way for him to take everything I owned. My pension redirect didn't just deposit my checks into a joint account. It gave Richard power of attorney over all my financial decisions. I'd signed away everything. My house, my savings, my financial autonomy, my future. And Richard, my son, my firstborn. The baby boy I'd rocked through colic and chicken pox and bad dreams had lied to me about all of it. I took photos of every document with my phone. My hands were shaking so badly that several pictures came out blurry, and I had to retake them. Then I carefully put everything back exactly as I'd found it. Locked the filing cabinet, locked the office, returned the keys to their hiding spots. Then I went to my room and threw up. I called Diane the next day from the bathroom with the fan running to cover my voice. "I have the documents," I whispered. "It's worse than you thought. Can you meet me?" Diane asked. "Somewhere he won't see you?" We met at a coffee shop near the senior center. Diane reviewed the photos on my phone, her expression growing darker with each swipe. "Dorothy, this is textbook elder financial abuse. He's taken nearly $300,000 from you. The trust is a sham. It's essentially his personal account that he can use however he wants. And the power of attorney you signed is so broad that he could sell your organs if you died and he thought he'd profit. What do I do?" "We file a complaint with Adult Protective Services today. We petition the court to invalidate these documents based on undue influence. We get you a real lawyer who specializes in elder law. I know someone excellent who'll take your case. And Dorothy, you need to leave that house. Now. Today." Where would I go? "Do you have any other family? Friends?" I thought of Lisa in her cramped apartment. Michael in Seattle. My friend Helen who'd moved to a retirement community in Florida. Not really. There are shelters, temporary housing for seniors in your situation. No, I said firmly. The idea of ending up in a shelter, of having my failure be that public, that visible, I couldn't bear it. "I'll figure something out." What I figured out was both simple and terrifying. I'd stay in Richard's house, and I'd make him face what he'd done that evening. When the whole family was gathered in the living room, Richard reading on his iPad, Sandra planning something on her laptop, the kids absorbed in their screens, I walked in and stood in the center of the room. "I need to talk to everyone," I said. Richard glanced up, annoyed. "Mom, we're busy. I know about the money," I said. The room went very still. Sandra's fingers stopped moving on her keyboard. Richard's face went carefully blank. "What money?" he asked. "The $287,000 from my house sale that you told me was only $20,000. The trust that gives you complete control of my assets. The pension you've been depositing into your account and using for your own expenses while I'm not allowed to eat the good turkey." Madison looked up from her phone, suddenly interested. Tyler's eyes went wide. "Mom, you don't understand," Richard started. "Don't." My voice came out stronger than I expected. "Don't insult me by pretending I'm confused or senile. I found the documents. I've taken photos. I've spoken to a lawyer." Sandra stood up. "You went through Richard's private files? That's a violation of what? Privacy? Trust?" I laughed, and it sounded harsh and broken. "You want to talk to me about violations of trust? The money is being managed responsibly," Richard said, his lawyer voice emerging calm, rational, making me seem hysterical by contrast. "Everything I've done is legal and in your best interest. That trust protects your assets from me?" I asked. "Or for you?" "Grandma, what's happening?" Emma asked in a small voice. I looked at my youngest grandchild, and something in me broke. She deserved better than this. They all did. Growing up in a house where grandma was treated like a servant, where money mattered more than people, where trust was just another word for exploitation. What's happening, I said carefully, is that I trusted people I shouldn't have. And now I'm fixing it. You're making a mistake, Richard said, and for the first time, I heard something other than calm in his voice. I heard threat. If you pursue this, Mom, you'll end up with nothing. Legal fees alone will consume whatever you think you're owed. And where will you go? You have no house, no money because you took it. I managed it. Do you have any idea how much it costs to maintain this house? To feed everyone? You think your little pension covers what you consume? Then let me leave, I said. Give me my money, and I'll go. Sandra laughed. It was an ugly sound. Richard's right. You'd blow through it in a year, end up in some state-run facility, and then where would we be? At least here you're taken care of, taken care of. The words came out as a whisper. I sleep in a storage closet. I'm not allowed to eat certain foods. I work every day cooking and cleaning and driving your children around, and I'm treated like I should be grateful for the privilege. You're being dramatic, Sandra said coldly. We've given you a place to live, you've given me a prison. I turned and walked out of the room. Behind me, I heard Richard and Sandra arguing in fierce whispers, heard Madison telling Tyler something that made him gasp, heard Emma starting to cry. In my room, I called Lisa. Mom, what's wrong? I told her everything. Every word spilled out in a rush to documents. The money, the months of being treated like nothing, the conversation I'd just had downstairs. Lisa was silent for a long time after I finished. Mom, she finally said, her voice tight with fury. Why didn't you tell me? I was ashamed. Of what? Richard's the one who should be ashamed. That son of a bitch. She took a breath. Okay, pack a bag. I'm coming to get you. You're staying with me until we sort this out. Lisa, your apartment is tiny. I don't care if I have to sleep on the couch for 6 months. You're my mother. You don't live like this. Pack. I'll be there in 40 minutes. I packed quickly, grabbing only essentials. Clothes, toiletries, the photo of Frank and me. I left behind everything else. They were just things anyway. And things didn't matter anymore. Richard knocked on my door as I was zipping up my suitcase. Mom, let's talk about this rationally. Rationally, I repeated. Like when you rationally explained that my house only sold for $20,000. Or when you rationally set up a trust to protect my assets by giving yourself complete control. You're not well. You're confused. I'm not confused. I'm done. I opened the door, suitcase in hand. Richard blocked my path. If you leave, if you pursue this legal nonsense, I'll make sure everyone knows you're unstable. I'll testify that you've been showing signs of dementia. I'll have you declared incompetent. I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, who I'd loved more than my own life, and I barely recognized him. Do what you need to do, I said quietly, but move out of my way. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't. Then he stepped aside, and I walked past him, down the stairs, out the front door. Lisa was pulling up as I reached the curb. I'd never been so happy to see anyone in my life. The next 6 months were harder than I expected. Not physically. Lisa's apartment was small but warm, and she refused to let me feel like a burden. She moved her home office into her bedroom so I could have the second room. She rearranged her life to accommodate mine, and she did it with grace and fierce love. The hard part was the legal battle. Richard fought everything. He claimed I'd been mentally declining for years, that he'd taken over my finances to protect me from myself. He provided testimony from Sandra about my confusion and memory problems. He painted himself as the dutiful son dealing with a difficult, ungrateful mother. Diane's lawyer colleague, a woman named Patricia Chen who specialized in elder abuse cases, was magnificent. She deposed everyone: Richard, Sandra, even Madison and Tyler. She got testimonies from my doctors confirming I was mentally sound. She brought in forensic accountants who traced exactly where my money had gone. Turns out, Richard and Sandra had used my $287,000 to remodel their kitchen, buy the Escalade, and fund expensive family vacations. They'd been living well off my life savings while I slept in a storage room and felt grateful for peanut butter sandwiches. The case went to court. It was brutal. Richard's lawyers tried to destroy my credibility. They brought up times I'd forgotten appointments, misplaced my keys, gotten confused about dates, normal things that happen to everyone, twisted into evidence of incompetence. I had to sit in a courtroom and listen to my son lie under oath about how concerned he'd been for my welfare, how he'd only been trying to help. Lisa held my hand through all of it. Michael flew in from Seattle for the final hearings, horrified when he learned what Richard had done. Even my grandchildren from Richard's family, Madison and Tyler, quietly reached out to Lisa, asking if I was okay, saying they were sorry. The judge was a woman in her 60s who'd probably seen 1,000 cases like mine. When she read her decision, her voice was crisp and angry. Elder financial abuse is one of the most insidious crimes in our society, she said, looking directly at Richard. It preys on trust, on family bonds, on the vulnerability of aging. Mr. Castellano, you are an attorney. You knew exactly what you were doing when you manipulated your mother into signing over her assets. You exploited her grief, her trust, and her love for you. This court finds clear and convincing evidence of undue influence, breach of fiduciary duty, and financial exploitation. The trust was invalidated. The house transfer was reversed. Richard had to buy back my house at market value, which had appreciated significantly, or pay me the equivalent. The court awarded me every penny he'd taken, plus interest. Plus my legal fees. It came to just over $400. Richard was also stripped of his power of attorney, placed under court monitoring, and required to attend counseling for elder abuse. His law firm quietly asked him to resign. Sandra filed for divorce 3 months later. Apparently she'd only loved him when he had money. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I just felt sad because I'd won the case, but I'd lost my son. Richard wouldn't speak to me. He moved out of state. The grandchildren from his family stopped calling. It was like he'd died, except worse, because he was alive somewhere, hating me. Lisa said I shouldn't feel guilty, that I'd done the right thing. Michael agreed. Patricia told me I'd potentially saved other seniors by exposing Richard's tactics, but none of that changed the fact that my family was broken. I used some of the money to buy a small house not far from Lisa. Nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom bungalow with a garden I could manage and enough space to breathe. I furnished it with new things and a few items retrieved from storage, including Frank's reading chair. I started volunteering at the senior center, helping Diane with legal aid clinics. I met Walter again. He'd become a regular at the Thursday lunches. We became friends, then more than friends. Nothing scandalous, just 2 old people who enjoyed each other's company, who understood that life was short and complicated and precious. Emma started visiting me, brought by Madison, who'd gotten her driver's license. They came every few weeks, and slowly, we rebuilt something. Not what we'd had that was gone forever, but something new, something more honest. Tyler reached out on my birthday, calling to wish me well. His voice cracked with emotion when he told me he was sorry, that he'd been scared to contact me earlier, that he'd miss me. Michael visited twice a year now, making the effort he'd never made before. And Lisa, my daughter, my champion, she had dinner with me every Sunday. We cooked together in my new kitchen, talking about everything and nothing, making up for lost time. But Richard never called, never wrote, never acknowledged that I existed. And that's the price I paid for standing up for myself. I think about that a lot. Was it worth it? Would I do it again? The answer is yes. Every time, yes. Because here's what I learned in that storage room. In those months of feeling small and worthless and trapped, you teach people how to treat you. And when you accept crumbs, when you apologize for existing, when you let people, even people you love, exploit your kindness, you lose something essential. You lose yourself. I'd spent months being grateful for inadequate food and inadequate shelter and inadequate love. I'd convinced myself that this was what I deserved, that I should be thankful for whatever scraps I was given. But I was Dorothy Castellano. I'd taught elementary school for 40 years. I'd raised 3 children, mostly on my own after Frank's heart couldn't take it anymore. I'd survived grief and loneliness and financial struggle. I'd maintained my dignity through everything life threw at me, until I'd let my own son take it away. Getting it back wasn't about money. The $400,000 meant security and independence, but it didn't heal the wound. What healed was remembering that I mattered, that I deserved respect and kindness and good turkey if I wanted it, that being old didn't make me worthless, that being alone was better than being exploited, that family wasn't just about blood. It was about love and respect and reciprocity. Richard had forgotten that. Or maybe he'd never understood it. Either way, I couldn't fix him. I could only fix my own life, so I did. I'm 74 now. I wake up in my own house, in my own bed, in a room that smells like the lavender I planted in window boxes. I make coffee in a kitchen that's truly mine. I eat whatever I want for breakfast, sometimes fancy organic yogurt, sometimes eggs, sometimes leftover pizza because I'm old and I can do what I want. I spend my days however I choose. Sometimes I volunteer, sometimes I garden. Sometimes Walter and I go to the movies or take walks or just sit on my porch and watch the neighborhood kids play. I'm not rich, but I'm comfortable. I'm not surrounded by family, but I'm not alone. I'm not the same woman I was before Frank died, before Richard's betrayal, before I learned exactly what I was capable of surviving. I'm better. Last week, I got a letter, no return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Richard's. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Lisa, who was visiting, asked if I wanted her to read it first. I shook my head. Inside was a single page handwritten. Mom, I've been in therapy. Court mandated at first, but I've continued on my own. My therapist thinks I should reach out to you. She thinks I need to make amends. I don't know if I can. Not because you don't deserve it, you deserve so much more than I ever gave you. But because I'm not sure I understand yet how I became the kind of person who could do what I did. I've lost everything. My job, my marriage, my self-respect. And I keep thinking that I deserve it, that this is cosmic justice for what I did to you. But then I remember that you lost things too. You lost your home, your savings, your son, and you didn't deserve any of it. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I want it. Because I'm not sure I've earned the right to ask. I just wanted you to know that I know. I know what I did. I know what I took from you. And I'm sorry. It's not enough. It'll never be enough. But it's true. Riccardi read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. Are you going to respond? Lisa asked. I don't know. I said honestly. Maybe someday. When I'm ready. Do you forgive him? I thought about that. Forgiveness is complicated when the wound is that deep, when the betrayal came from someone you'd have died to protect. I forgive him for being flawed, I said slowly, for being human and selfish and capable of terrible choices. But I don't forgive what he did. I don't know if I ever will. That seems fair. It's honest, I said. And that's all I have now, honesty. The letter sits in that drawer still. Sometimes I take it out and reread it. Sometimes I draft responses I never send. Sometimes I imagine a future where Richard and I rebuild something. Some new relationship built on truth instead of obligation. But mostly, I just live my life. Because that's what I've earned. Not just money or a house or legal vindication, but the right to wake up every morning and decide for myself what kind of day I'm going to have. The right to be treated with dignity. The right to say no. The right to take up space in the world without apologizing. The right to be imperfect and old and sometimes forgetful and still worthy of respect. Those are the rights they took from me in that storage room. And those are the rights I took back. Not because a judge said I could, but because I remembered I'd always had them. I just had to be brave enough to claim them. And in the end, that's what this whole terrible, painful, necessary journey taught me. Sometimes love means letting go. Sometimes dignity means fighting back. Sometimes family means choosing the people who choose you. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is save yourself, even if it costs you everything, even if it costs you everyone, even if it means sleeping alone in a house that's quiet but yours, eating meals that are simple but chosen, living a life that's smaller but infinitely more free. I'm Dorothy Castellano. I taught 3rd grade for 40 years. I loved a man named Frank who left too soon. I raised 3 children and lost one to his own darkness. I survived betrayal and learned that surviving isn't enough. You have to reclaim. And I'm still here, still standing, still fighting, still worthy. Frank would be proud, and more importantly, I'm proud of myself. That's enough. That's everything. That's the secret they hid for 40 years. The one I finally discovered. You're never too old to save yourself. You just have to believe you're worth saving. I am. I always was. I just forgot for a while. But I remember now.